everything. There comes a moment when you realize the version of yourself you've been living as isn't the one you're meant to become. The habits, the excuses, everything. The fear they all belong to a past that no longer fits. To rise, you must first destroy. This audiobook isn't about motivation. It's about transformation. Everything. It's about burning down what's false, facing the silence of solitude, and building a version of yourself that no one and nothing can take from you. Everything. This is not reinvention for attention. This is rebirth through isolation, power forged in peace. You're not just changing your life. You're rebuilding your identity from the ground up. Everything. There's always a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when everything inside you begins to crack. It might not happen in an explosion, but in a whisper. You wake up one day, everything, and the life that once felt familiar suddenly feels foreign. The clothes, the habits, the conversations, even the dreams you used to chase, none of it fits anymore. Everything. Something deep inside you begins to whisper, "This isn't me anymore." And that whisper, if you're brave enough to listen, becomes the beginning of your transformation. Everything. Every transformation starts with a collapse. Not the kind that destroys you, but the kind that reveals you. The truth is, the old version of you, the one that was built on fear, approval, everything, and survival, has to die before the real you can be born. Most people resist this stage. They cling to what's familiar, even when it's suffocating them. Everything. They try to patch up what's falling apart, instead of asking why it needed to fall apart in the first place. But the ones who truly change, they learn to let the collapse happen. Everything. They stop running from the breakdown and start walking through it. Think about it. Every building that stands tall today once had to clear its ground. Before new foundations can be laid, everything. The old structure must be demolished. That's what the collapse is, demolition of the false self. The version of you that's been shaped by other people's opinions, everything, by fear of rejection, by the endless need to prove your worth. You've probably worn that version for years, smiling when you're breaking inside, everything, pretending you're fine because the world told you to stay strong. But strength isn't pretending. Strength is facing the truth. I can't keep living like this. Maybe for you, everything. That truth comes after a failed relationship, the one where you kept giving pieces of yourself until you had nothing left. Maybe it's after losing a job that once defined your identity. Everything. Or maybe it comes quietly in the middle of an ordinary day when you look around and realize you've built a life that looks stable on the outside but feels empty on the inside. Everything. That's the moment of collapse, when comfort becomes a cage. At first, it feels like loss. You grieve who you used to be. You miss the version of yourself that didn't question so much. Everything. That could hide behind distractions and noise. You feel fear rise in your chest because what's next is unknown. And yet, if you stay still long enough, everything. You start to notice something strange underneath the chaos. There's peace. Because for the first time in your life, everything false is falling away. When you let the collapse happen, everything, you start to see how much of your old life was built on borrowed beliefs. Everything. How many times you said, "Yes," when your soul was screaming, "No." How many dreams weren't yours to begin with? Everything. But things you chased because someone told you that's what success looks like. The collapse doesn't destroy who you are. It destroys who you are not. You see, everything, every identity we hold on to comes with an expiration date. The student becomes the teacher. The dreamer becomes the doer. The caretaker becomes the creator. Growth demands evolution. Everything. And evolution demands endings. But we've been conditioned to fear endings, as if something dying within us means we've failed. In truth, it means you've finally outgrown your old skin. Everything. It's like a snake shedding. Uncomfortable, vulnerable, necessary. The skin that once protected you now limits you. If it doesn't peel away, it suffocates you. Everything. You can't evolve inside an old identity. You can't become your future self while still being loyal to your past self. Something has to break. Something has to burn. Everything. That's what most people don't understand. The collapse isn't punishment, it's preparation. The universe doesn't take things away to hurt you. Everything. It clears space for what you've been asking for. But you can't receive new blessings while clinging to old burdens. Sometimes, everything. Your prayers for growth are answered in the form of endings. The relationship ending, the opportunity fading, the version of you that can no longer pretend. Everything. There's a point when the pain of staying the same becomes heavier than the fear of change. That's when transformation begins. You stop chasing comfort and start craving truth. Everything. You stop trying to be liked and start wanting to be real. And being real, that's terrifying. Because it means standing in front of the mirror and seeing every lie you've told yourself. Everything, every excuse. Every time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't. But in that rawness, in that moment of honesty, is where you finally meet yourself. Everything. The collapse will strip you bare. It'll test everything you thought you knew about strength. You'll lose people who can't understand your growth. You'll be misunderstood, everything, maybe even judged. The world will tell you you've changed. And that's the point. Because if you're not changing, you're not evolving. But here's the truth no one tells you, everything. Not everyone deserves access to the new you. Some people were only meant to know you at a certain level of your evolution. When you grow, everything, you'll realize that your peace costs more than their approval. That walking alone is better than walking with those who keep you small. Let it collapse. Let it all fall apart. The roles, everything. The routines, the relationships that no longer align. The version of you that's being destroyed isn't dying because you failed. It's dying because you're finally ready to live. Everything. Take a deep breath and think about this. When a seed breaks open, we don't call it destruction. We call it growth. The breaking is what allows new life to emerge. Everything. The same is true for you. The old identity, the old patterns, the old story, they have to crack open for something more authentic to come through. Everything. You might find yourself in solitude during this process, and that's not a coincidence. When everything falls away, everything, you're left alone with yourself, the one person you can't hide from. That's where real rebuilding begins. But before rebuilding, you have to clear the debris. Everything. That means confronting what's been buried under years of distraction, the insecurities, the beliefs, the habits that no longer serve you. Ask yourself, everything. What am I holding on to that's holding me back? What identity am I protecting that's already expired? What am I afraid will happen if I let everything false fall away? Everything. These are hard questions, but they lead to liberation. Because every answer brings clarity, and clarity is power. In this stage, you'll notice resistance. Everything. Your mind will try to pull you back to the familiar. It'll whisper things like, everything. It's safer there. You've always been this way. Don't change. People won't understand. But remember, the mind's job is to protect, not evolve. Everything. You must train it to follow your spirit, not your fear. The collapse teaches you surrender, not as weakness, but as wisdom. Because when you stop forcing things to stay the same, everything, life begins to move again. You stop begging for what's gone and start preparing for what's coming. That's when the shift happens. You begin to trust the process. Everything. You begin to realize that endings are not the opposite of beginnings, they are the doorway to them. There will be nights when it feels unbearable. Everything. When you wonder if you'll ever find yourself again. But even in those moments, something inside you, call it your higher self, your spirit, your truth, is whispering, keep going. Everything. Because what's being destroyed isn't you, it's everything that isn't aligned with who you're becoming. The collapse strips away the noise so you can finally hear your own voice. Everything. It humbles you, grounds you, and rebuilds you with intention. It shows you what truly matters. Not validation, not status, not applause, but peace. Everything. It teaches you that freedom isn't found in what you add to your life, but in what you let go of. And slowly, after the dust settles, you'll notice something beautiful. Everything. You'll start to feel lighter. The same things that once triggered you won't hold the same power. The same places that drained you will no longer feel like home. Everything. You'll begin to crave authenticity over attention, alignment over attachment. You'll stop performing and start existing. The collapse isn't the end of your story. Everything. It's the moment the real story begins, the one you were always meant to live. So when life falls apart, don't run, watch. Listen, feel. Let the old you die with grace. Everything. Because on the other side of destruction is creation. And what's waiting to be created is you. There's a point in every person's life when the noise becomes too loud. The opinions, everything, the expectations, the constant pull of other people's energy, it all starts to blur your sense of who you are. Everything. You wake up one day and realize you've been living more for the world than for yourself. You've been reacting instead of creating. Everything. That's when the real journey begins, when life starts stripping away distractions and invites you into isolation, not as punishment, but as a sacred calling. Everything. Most people fear solitude because it exposes the truth. It's easier to stay busy than to face yourself. Everything. It's easier to drown in conversation than to sit in silence and hear your own thoughts echo. But the truth is, growth requires solitude. Every transformation, every awakening, everything, every rebirth begins in the quiet. Think of nature. A seed doesn't grow in the spotlight. It grows underground, in the dark, away from eyes and noise. Everything. Isolation is that darkness for your soul, the space where roots take hold before anything beautiful ever appears above the surface. When you begin your season of becoming everything, it may not feel sacred at first. It might feel lonely. It might feel like the world has forgotten you. You might question why everything suddenly feels distant. Why people drift away. Everything. Why plans fall apart. Why silence replaces chaos. But this is not life rejecting you. This is life refining you. Everything. The universe knows you can't build a new version of yourself while carrying the weight of everyone's opinions. So it removes the noise. Everything. It places you in solitude so you can finally hear the only voice that matters. Your own. In those early days of isolation, you'll face discomfort. Your mind will crave distraction. Everything. You'll reach for your phone, scroll endlessly, try to fill the silence with something familiar. But if you can resist that urge, if you can sit still long enough, everything. Something powerful begins to happen. You start to see patterns. You start to recognize habits that no longer serve you. You start to notice the emotions you've been avoiding for years. Everything. Isolation has a way of holding up a mirror, not to shame you, but to show you what needs to be healed. Imagine a sculptor with a block of marble. To create something beautiful, everything. They don't add, they remove. They chip away at everything that doesn't belong until the masterpiece is revealed. That's what isolation does. It chips away the noise, the old beliefs, everything, the false identities. It strips you down until only the truth remains. It's not destruction for the sake of pain. It's purification for the sake of power. Everything. Many people misunderstand this process. They think being alone means being empty. But the truth is, solitude isn't emptiness. It's space. Space to think. Space to feel. Everything. Space to rebuild. When you finally stop chasing everything external, validation, comparison, approval, you begin to access something internal: clarity. Everything. You start asking better questions. Who am I really? What do I want? What matters to me beyond what looks good or pleases others? These questions can't be answered in noise. Everything. They can only be answered in silence. I remember a story about a man who lost everything. His business failed, his friends disappeared, his confidence collapsed. For months, everything. He tried to fix things by running faster, taking meetings, chasing new opportunities, pretending he was fine. But the harder he ran, the emptier he felt. Eventually, everything exhausted and defeated, he stopped. He moved to a small cabin in the woods, no internet, no TV, no distractions. For weeks, he sat with his thoughts. At first, it was unbearable. Then, everything. Something shifted. In that silence, he rediscovered his creativity. He realized the business he had built was never truly his dream. It was a performance. Out there alone, everything. He began sketching ideas for something new, a project that aligned with who he really was. That time alone didn't destroy him. It revealed him. Everything. That's what solitude offers. Revelation. The things that used to define you begin to lose their grip. You stop trying to impress people who no longer matter. Everything. You stop explaining your evolution to those committed to misunderstanding it. You stop apologizing for your growth. Because isolation teaches you something no crowd ever will: self-approval. Everything. When you become comfortable in your own company, you stop chasing belonging. You create it within yourself. Everything. And when that shift happens, when loneliness turns to peace, you begin to see the beauty in being alone. You notice how calm mornings feel when you don't rush. Everything. How freeing it is to move at your own pace. How your intuition becomes louder and clearer when you finally listen. You realize that solitude isn't something to escape. Everything. It's something to embrace. It's where your real self finally feels safe enough to speak. But let's be honest, it's not always comfortable. Everything. There will be nights when the silence feels heavy. There will be moments when you crave the validation you once had. There will be times you question if you're doing the right thing. Everything. And that's okay. Isolation doesn't promise comfort. It promises growth. Every time you face that discomfort and stay grounded, you're building emotional muscle. Everything. You're learning how to stand without needing to be held. You're learning to find light in your own darkness. The most powerful people in history understood this. Artists, monks, athletes, everything. philosophers. They all retreated from the world to master themselves. Because solitude sharpens you. It focuses your mind. It teaches you to listen deeply, not to others, but to truth, everything. When the noise fades, your priorities realign. You begin to see what actually matters and what was just distraction dressed as importance. You stop performing and start becoming everything. Think of isolation as a spiritual gym. Every moment you resist the urge to fill the silence, you strengthen your focus. Every time you face your emotions instead of escaping them, everything, you build resilience. Every day you spend alone intentionally, you reinforce your identity from the inside out, everything. You learn that solitude isn't about avoiding people. It's about anchoring your energy so deeply that no one else can shake it. This sacred season also teaches you patience, everything. Growth doesn't happen on command. It unfolds slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. You have moments of frustration where nothing seems to move, where progress feels invisible, everything. But even then, remember, just because you can't see the roots growing doesn't mean they aren't. Isolation works in silence, everything. The most important changes often happen where no one is watching. During this time, protect your energy like it's sacred. Because it is. Be selective with what you consume, everything. The music you listen to, the content you watch, the conversations you engage in. They all shape your mental environment. When you're rebuilding yourself, everything, even small influences can either elevate or erode your progress. Feed your solitude with wisdom, not noise. With inspiration, not comparison. Everything. Use this season to rebuild your relationship with yourself. Learn to enjoy your own company. Take walks without your phone. Write down your thoughts without censoring them. Everything. Reflect on what truly matters to you. Ask yourself, what kind of person am I becoming? Does my current routine align with that vision? Am I living out of fear or out of faith? Everything. These are not questions for crowded rooms. They're questions for quiet mornings and long nights. You'll know you're transforming when peace starts to replace the old chaos. Everything. When you stop needing to prove your worth. When you start feeling grateful for solitude instead of fighting it. That's when the sacred season of becoming begins to show its power. Everything. The silence that once felt like emptiness now feels like alignment. You realize that isolation never took anything from you. It gave you back everything you had lost: your clarity, everything, your confidence, your connection to self. So if you find yourself in a season where life feels still, where everything external seems to fade away, don't rush to fill the void. Sit with it, everything. Listen, this is the universe clearing space for your next evolution. This is where the real work begins. Not in noise, not in validation, but in quiet transformation, everything. Isolation is not the end. It's the beginning of mastery. It's the cocoon where you outgrow your old self, where you prepare for the flight ahead. You don't have to fear being alone, everything. You just have to remember why you were placed there. To rediscover your power, to rebuild your truth, to return to the world not half built, but whole, everything. When everything you thought you were begins to fall apart, when the noise fades and the distractions are stripped away, everything. What's left is the raw version of you, the one beneath the conditioning, beneath the survival patterns, beneath the lies you told yourself just to get through another day, everything. That's where rebuilding begins. Not with a new plan, not with a morning routine, but with the mind itself. Because your reality will never change until your internal programming does. Everything. The mind is both the architect and the prisoner. It builds the walls you live within and holds the key to your own freedom. Everything. Most people don't realize they've been running the same mental code for years. The same beliefs, same emotional responses, everything. Same excuses replaying in loops so familiar they feel like truth. I'm not good enough. I always fail. That's just how I am. These are not facts, they're scripts, everything. And if you can rewrite the script, you can rewrite your life. Reprogramming the mind is not about pretending everything is perfect, everything. It's about replacing what's automatic with what's intentional. Think of your mind as an operating system that has been collecting input since the day you were born. From parents, everything. Teachers, friends, and experiences that shaped your identity before you even had a say. When you start this work, you're not just changing thoughts, everything. You're updating an entire system that's been running outdated code for years. You start by becoming aware. Awareness is the light that exposes the hidden patterns. Everything. Pay attention to your self-talk. The quiet sentences that play in your head when things go wrong, when you wake up late, when you fail at something small. Do you attack yourself? Everything. Or do you forgive yourself? Do you see mistakes as proof of inadequacy or evidence of progress? Every reaction reveals your programming. You can't change what you don't see, everything, and you can't reprogram what you refuse to confront. There's a story of a man who trained for years to become a pilot. He studied every manual, mastered every maneuver, everything, and memorized every emergency protocol. But when he finally sat in the cockpit for his first solo flight, he froze. His instructor asked what was wrong. The man whispered, "Everything. I know what to do, but I don't believe I can do it." That's the difference between information and programming. You can know all the right things, everything. Yet if your subconscious doesn't believe you're capable, you'll sabotage yourself every time. That's why reprogramming must go deeper than motivation. Everything. Motivation is a spark. It's powerful but temporary. Programming is wiring. It's automatic. If you want permanent transformation, you have to teach your mind a new language. Everything. Start with your thoughts, but reinforce them with evidence. When you tell yourself, "I am disciplined," back it up with a single disciplined act. When you say, "Everything, I am confident," prove it by speaking up once when you normally stay silent. Your brain learns through repetition and proof. Every time you act in alignment with your new identity, everything, you override a piece of the old code. This process takes patience. The mind resists change because it equates the familiar with safe. Even if your old habits hurt you, everything, they are predictable. And the mind loves predictability. It's why people stay in toxic relationships, dead-end jobs, or self-sabotaging cycles. The unknown, even if it holds freedom, everything feels dangerous. You must learn to sit in that discomfort and remind yourself, this isn't fear, everything. It's reprogramming. Every uncomfortable step forward is a line of new code being written into your mind. Everything. Let's talk about self-doubt, one of the most stubborn bugs in the mental system. Doubt is not a sign that you're weak. It's a sign that you're evolving. Everything. The old version of you doubts because it's trying to protect its identity. It whispers, "What if you fail?" Not to destroy you, but to keep you in familiar territory. Everything. The antidote isn't to ignore the voice. It's to lead it. Speak to it like a mentor to a frightened child. "I hear you. Everything. But we're doing this anyway." That's how you build inner authority, by leading your mind instead of obeying it. Fear, too, is part of the code. Everything. It was programmed into you for survival, but now it often misfires. It tells you to stay small, to stay silent, to avoid risk. But growth lives on the other side of discomfort. Everything. One way to reprogram fear is to rename it. Instead of saying, "I'm afraid," try, "I'm preparing." The body's response to fear and excitement is almost identical. Racing heart, everything. Quickened breath, alertness. The difference is the story you attach to the sensation. Change the story, and fear becomes fuel. Everything. Visualization is another powerful tool for rewriting your inner code. Your brain doesn't perfectly distinguish between what's vividly imagined and what's actually experienced. Everything. When you repeatedly visualize yourself succeeding, staying calm under pressure, or following through on your goals, you train your neural pathways to treat that outcome as familiar. Everything. That familiarity becomes confidence. Athletes, soldiers, and entrepreneurs all use this technique, not as fantasy, but as mental rehearsal. The more real it feels in your mind, everything, the easier it becomes to create in your life. But visualization without action is just daydreaming. You must anchor new thoughts and behavior. Everything. This is where discipline steps in, not as punishment, but as reinforcement. Every disciplined action sends a message to your subconscious. This is who I am now. Everything. You wake up early not because it's trendy, but because you're proving to your mind that you're no longer the person who postpones purpose. Everything. You keep promises to yourself not for perfection, but for programming. Each small act of consistency reaffirms your new identity until it becomes your default. Everything. There's a powerful shift that happens when you start living this way. You stop chasing confidence, and you start building it. You stop waiting for motivation, and you start generating it. Everything. Confidence isn't born from words, it's born from evidence. When your actions consistently align with your new mindset, the internal war begins to quiet. Everything. You stop arguing with your old self because you're too busy becoming your new one. Everything. One of the biggest breakthroughs in reprogramming comes when you realize that your thoughts are not facts, they're habits. A thought repeated often enough becomes belief. Everything. A belief lived long enough becomes identity. But you are the thinker, not the thought. You can observe the stream of mental chatter without drowning in it. When your mind says, "Everything, I can't do this. Pause and respond. That's an old file. We don't run that program anymore. It might sound simple, even silly, but over time, everything, that self-awareness becomes liberation. Reprogramming is a daily practice. Some days you'll feel unstoppable, and others you'll feel like nothing is changing, everything. But remember, you're not just fighting your habits, you're rewriting history. Every moment of resistance is proof that you're moving beyond what's familiar, everything. When your old thoughts surface, see them for what they are: echoes of a system being replaced. Don't argue with them, just return to your new code, your new focus, your new identity, everything. You might notice something else along the way. The people around you may start reacting differently. Some will be inspired by your change, others will feel threatened by it, everything. That's not your problem to fix. Their reaction is a reflection of their programming, not yours. When you change your inner code, you automatically change your energetic signature, everything. You attract new experiences that align with your growth. Opportunities, relationships, even random moments of synchronicity. The universe starts mirroring the software you run inside, everything. And it all begins with a single choice: to stop being a passenger in your own mind, to lead your thoughts instead of being led by them, everything. To stop waiting for proof of worth and start acting like someone who already believes. You won't wake up one morning completely reprogrammed. It doesn't work like that. Everything. Transformation happens quietly, almost imperceptibly, through repetition, reflection, and resilience. One thought at a time, one decision at a time, everything. One line of code rewritten each day until the system you once struggled to escape becomes the foundation of your power, everything. There will come a moment, and it will happen subtly, when you realize you no longer react the way you used to. The situations that once triggered you lose their grip, everything. The voice of self-doubt grows faint. The storm inside settles into focus. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. Everything. That's the result of the invisible work you've done. The rewiring of your inner world. You'll begin to feel a sense of calm control. Everything. A deep knowing that no matter what happens externally, you can lead yourself internally. And that is freedom, the kind no one can give you and no one can take away. Everything. That's the power of reprogramming the mind. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Before the world told you who to be, everything. When you learn to lead your thoughts, you lead your life. And when you lead your life with discipline, focus, and belief, you don't just rebuild yourself. You redefine what's possible. Everything. Discipline isn't restriction, it's creation. Most people hear the word discipline and immediately think of limitation, control, or punishment, everything. But real discipline, the kind that transforms your life, isn't about what you take away, it's about what you build. It's the foundation of identity, everything. The invisible structure behind every version of yourself you've ever dreamed of becoming. You can't change your life by hoping for it, everything. You change it by building systems that make the old version of you impossible to return to. When you start rebuilding yourself, everything, discipline, becomes your greatest ally and your greatest test. Because in the beginning, it doesn't feel powerful. It feels boring. It feels lonely. It feels like no one notices. Everything. You wake up early when no one's watching. You eat clean when everyone else is indulging. You stay focused while others are distracted. There's no applause for consistency. Everything. No instant reward for patience. But that's exactly why discipline is sacred. Because it's proof that your motivation no longer depends on emotion. You move, everything. Even when you don't feel like it. You show up, even when no one's looking. That's the birth of identity. When action no longer needs approval to be valid. Everything. There's a quiet kind of power in doing what you said you would do. It's not dramatic. It's not flashy. But over time, it rewires your brain. Everything. Each small act of discipline tells your subconscious, I am reliable. I keep my word. I lead myself. And when you start to see yourself as someone who can be trusted, everything changes. Everything. You don't chase motivation anymore. You build momentum. You stop negotiating with your excuses because you've proven, day after day, that you can handle discomfort. Everything. That's when discipline stops being something you do and starts becoming who you are. Think about an artist who paints every single day. Not because inspiration strikes, everything, but because the act itself defines them. They show up to the canvas whether the muse visits or not. They paint through frustration, through fatigue, through doubt, everything. And after years of repetition, the work becomes second nature, an extension of their being. That's discipline. It's not forcing yourself, everything. It's training yourself until consistency becomes instinct. The same principle applies to every part of life: fitness, business, relationships, mindset, everything. You become a master of your world by mastering your habits. Discipline isn't about control, it's about creation through repetition. Every disciplined act is a brick, everything, and every brick builds the architecture of your identity. You can't rush it, you can't fake it. But one day, everything, you'll look back and realize that what once required effort now feels effortless, because you became it. Many people wait for confidence before they take action. But here's the truth: everything. Confidence doesn't create discipline. Discipline creates confidence. You don't build self-belief by thinking highly of yourself. You build it by keeping promises to yourself. Everything. When you say, "I'll start today," and you actually do, your mind records that as truth. When you repeat that truth over and over, belief grows stronger. And eventually, everything. You stop needing external validation because you have internal evidence. You don't need to tell people who you are. Your results start speaking for you. Everything. There's a story about a man who wanted to transform his life completely. He had no money, no direction, no motivation. But every morning he made a rule: he would make his bed perfectly. Everything. It seemed trivial, almost meaningless. But that one act of structure gave him control over the start of his day. He did it for a week, then a month. Soon he began exercising. Everything. He started eating better, saving money, setting goals. Years later, he became successful beyond what he could have imagined. When people asked him how it all started, everything, he didn't say luck or opportunity. He said, "I made my bed." It sounds simple, but that's how discipline works. It starts small, but it expands into everything. Everything. It teaches your mind that structure is safety, that progress is possible, that control is in your hands. Everything. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You just need to prove to yourself, one consistent action at a time, that you're capable of more than you think. And yes, everything. Discipline will test you. There will be mornings when your body feels heavy, when your mind whispers, "Just skip today." There will be weeks where nothing seems to move. Everything. Where effort feels wasted, where you question if any of this matters. But in those moments, you have a choice to listen to the voice of weakness or the voice of mastery. Everything. Because mastery isn't built on convenience. It's built on commitment. And every time you choose consistency over comfort, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. Everything. Think of the old you, the one who chased quick highs, who relied on motivation that came and went like the weather. That version of you lived reactively, waiting for the right mood to act. Everything. But the new you, the disciplined you, understands something deeper: emotions are temporary, but standards are permanent. Discipline gives you a standard, a code to live by. Everything, regardless of how you feel. And that code becomes your compass. When you begin living by that compass, something incredible happens. Life stops feeling chaotic. There's structure. Everything. There's peace. You stop drowning in uncertainty because you've built order within yourself. You trust your process even when results take time. Everything. You stop chasing what's easy and start choosing what's right. And that shift, from chaos to clarity, that's where true freedom begins. Most people misunderstand freedom. Everything. They think it means doing whatever you want, whenever you want. But that's not freedom, that's chaos disguised as choice. Real freedom is the ability to direct yourself. Everything. To wake up early not because you have to, but because you choose to. To control your impulses instead of being controlled by them. Everything. Freedom isn't the absence of discipline. It's the reward of it. You'll start to notice this in subtle ways. You'll walk differently. Speak differently. Everything. You'll stop needing to explain yourself to people who don't understand your grind, because discipline gives you quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't boast. Everything. Doesn't need recognition. You'll know who you are, and when you know who you are, the opinions of others lose their power. There's beauty in structure. There's peace in repetition. Everything. What once felt like sacrifice begins to feel like self-respect. You'll realize that the things you used to avoid, the workouts, the early mornings, everything, the focused work sessions, were never punishment. They were preparation. Every repetition was carving a new identity into your being. Everything. Every act of self-control was sculpting the person you were destined to become. You start to fall in love with the process, not because it's easy, but because it's honest. Everything. Discipline doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter you. It exposes you. It shows you what you're made of. And through that exposure, you find power, everything. The kind of power that doesn't need to be announced, it just is, everything. Imagine looking at yourself in the mirror months from now and realizing you're no longer trying to become someone. You already are. The small daily decisions, the structure you built, everything. The standards you held, they've rewritten your identity. You're not pretending to be disciplined, you are disciplined, everything. You've become your own master, and that mastery shows in how you carry yourself, how you respond to challenge, how you move through the world. That's what discipline gives you, everything. Not control over others, but control over yourself. The ability to say no when you need to. The strength to stay when others quit, everything. The peace that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself, fully, completely. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, but it's real, and it's rare. So keep showing up, keep building, everything. Keep choosing the hard thing, even when no one claps for it. Because one day, you'll realize that the reward for discipline was never fame, never praise, never perfection, everything. The reward was becoming the kind of person who no longer breaks their own promises. The kind of person whose word, even to themselves, is law, everything. And that is how you become your own master. There comes a time in every transformation when the storm finally quiets. The noise fades, the doubts soften, everything. And what remains is something steady, something real. You look at yourself not in the mirror, but in the way you move, the way you speak, everything. The way you handle life. And for the first time in a long time, you recognize power in your own reflection. Not the kind of power that screams for attention, everything, but the kind that radiates peace. You've rebuilt yourself, and now you live as the new you. But here's the truth no one tells you about rebirth, everything. It's not a single moment of awakening. It's not a dramatic sunrise where everything suddenly makes sense. It's quieter than that. It's in the way you start choosing differently, everything. It's in the way you say no without guilt, yes without hesitation, and walk away from what used to keep you stuck. It's the small moments. The morning you wake up before your alarm, everything. The afternoon you keep your word to yourself. The evening you sit alone and feel content instead of lonely, everything. That's what it means to live as your higher self, to move through life in alignment with the person you worked so hard to become. You see, everything. Transformation isn't about changing everything overnight. It's about becoming deliberate, about realizing that your life is no longer built on reaction, but on creation, everything. You no longer chase validation, you command respect. You no longer beg for peace, you protect it. You no longer ask for permission because you already gave yourself authority to exist fully, everything. That is what rebirth feels like, quiet control. When you rebuild yourself alone, you begin to see the world differently. What once felt like chaos now feels like information, everything. You start noticing how people move, how energy shifts, how easily others are pulled by noise. But you stay centered. You don't need to prove who you are, everything, because your actions already speak louder than words. You've learned that real confidence doesn't come from being the loudest in the room. It comes from being the calmest one there, everything. Think about it. There's a different kind of gravity in someone who's been through fire and came out clear. They don't flinch when others doubt them, everything, because they've already faced doubt alone. They don't argue for their worth, because they've already built it from scratch, everything. That's what living as the new you is. Moving through life with quiet conviction, knowing that everything you lost was simply clearing space for what was meant to be built, everything. But here's the challenge: sustaining transformation requires discipline, not emotion. The same way you built this new version of yourself, through repetition, honesty, everything, and solitude, you have to maintain it with the same consistency. Because the world won't always understand the new you. People will try to pull you back into familiar patterns, everything. Old triggers will test you. Comfort will tempt you. And in those moments, you'll have to remember, this new identity isn't just a phase, it's a commitment, everything. Imagine a sculptor chiseling stone. Every day, they carve a little more, shaping something extraordinary from what was once unrecognizable. But if they stop too early, everything. If they walk away before the work is sealed, the masterpiece never becomes what it could have been. You are that sculptor, and your habits are your tools. Every routine you keep, everything. Every boundary you enforce, every time you choose patience over reaction, you're carving a stronger version of yourself, everything. There's a beauty in being unshakable, not because life stops testing you, but because you no longer crumble under the weight of it. The new you doesn't panic when plans fall apart. Everything. You adapt, you pivot, you trust that even in chaos, there's a pattern forming in your favor. You've developed faith, not blind faith, but the kind that's earned through experience. Everything. You've seen what happens when you keep showing up, even when no one's watching. You've seen how consistency compounds into confidence. That's not motivation. That's identity. Everything. When you start living as the new you, peace becomes your new status symbol. You begin to care less about how things look and more about how they feel. Everything. You'd rather have a quiet mind than a loud lifestyle. You'd rather have purpose than popularity. You stop explaining yourself to people who have no intention of understanding you. Everything. Instead, you channel that energy into your mission, into building, creating, and serving from a place of wholeness. And that's where life changes. Everything. Because the world responds differently to someone who's aligned. Opportunities that used to feel out of reach begin to gravitate toward you. Everything. The right people find you. Not because you're searching, but because your energy now speaks clearly. You attract what matches your peace, your discipline, your growth. Everything. That's the magnetic power of alignment. You stop chasing and start allowing. Let's be honest. Living as the new you won't always be glamorous. Everything. There will be days you'll still doubt, days you'll feel disconnected. Moments when the old version of you whispers back, tempting you with comfort. But remember, everything, the old you only exists in memory. It has no real power unless you give it attention. Growth doesn't erase the past, it redefines it. Everything. What once broke you now becomes proof of your strength. What once drained you now reminds you what to never settle for again. Think about a phoenix, that ancient symbol of rebirth. Everything. It doesn't rise from comfort, it rises from ashes, and even after it soars, it carries the memory of what it burned away. You're the same. Everything. You don't forget the person you used to be. You honor them, because their struggle built your strength. You don't hide your past, you let it remind you of how far you've come. Everything. Every scar becomes a signature of resilience. Living as the new you also means living intentionally. You start designing your life instead of drifting through it. You organize your thoughts, everything, your time, your energy. You stop saying yes to everything and start choosing what aligns with your future. You realize that discipline is freedom. The more structure you create, everything, the more space you have to grow. Your days stop being about survival and start being about direction. You'll notice, too, how your relationships evolve. Everything. Some people won't fit anymore. Not because they're bad, but because your energy has outgrown the dynamic. You'll have to make peace with letting some connections fade. Everything. That's not loss, that's alignment. The ones who truly belong in your new chapter will rise with you, match your energy, and respect your boundaries. The rest will naturally drift away. Everything. And that's okay. Rebirth requires release. There's also a newfound calm that comes with knowing you can rely on yourself. Everything. You've learned that solitude isn't emptiness, it's sovereignty. You don't fear being alone anymore, because you've discovered the version of you that thrives in stillness. Everything. You've learned how to self-soothe, how to self-motivate, how to self-regulate. That's real independence, not the loud, rebellious kind, but the kind that whispers, everything. I'm okay no matter what. And that's what makes the new you unstoppable. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you've become resilient. Everything. You've developed the ability to bend without breaking, to pause without quitting, to rebuild without resentment. You've learned how to breathe through chaos, how to move with purpose, everything, and how to trust that every challenge is shaping you for the next level. When you live as the new you, you realize success isn't something you chase, it's something you embody. Everything. It's not about having everything figured out, but about carrying yourself like someone who's becoming more every day. It's in the way you speak life into your goals. Everything. It's in the way you treat others with quiet strength. It's in the way you move, certain, steady, grounded. You've become your own foundation, your own home, your own peace, everything. And that's the true essence of rebirth, not proving you've changed, but living so intentionally, so authentically, that there's no trace of the old you left to explain. Everything. You simply exist as proof that solitude, discipline, and faith can rebuild anything, even you.